So tree is tree, not tree. And dry is dry, not dry. And if you learn this, it will really help you sound native. You're listening to Accent Amazing, where we combine language, linguistics, and history to help you improve your pronunciation and make your accent amazing. When I was young, I thought my name was spelt weird. Why was the name Adrian spelt with a D when it should be with a J, because it's clearly Adrian? Now I know some of you are thinking, isn't it a D? Isn't it Adrian? Where's the J sound? Especially if you're a non-native speaker of English and you're learning English, you might be thinking, yeah, DR and TR is a dr and a tr sound. But actually, native speakers of English, by and large nowadays, pronounce it Adrian. And then the TR and DR sounds are tr and dr with a ch and a j sound. And that happens all over the place. So tree is tree, not tree. And dry is dry, not dry. And if you learn this, it will really help you sound native, because non-native learners of English often miss out on this sound and they think it's 3 and 3, but it's actually a ch and a j sound. I know your mind is being blown right now, and that's exactly the topic we're going to go into today. The affrication, as it's called, of TR and DR in English. We'll first talk about the definition of what affrication is, what affricates are, and then go into how to produce the sound. Then give you some examples where it happens. And then at the very end, I'll talk about how English is evolving with this sound and give you examples in other languages. So what is affrication? Not aspiration. I know I've talked about aspiration before, but what is affrication? Affrication is the process by which a consonant, usually a stop or a fricative sound, changes into an affricate sound. Now there's a lot of new words there, so let's unpack that terminology. Stop consonants are consonants that are produced by stopping the air, such as, for example, p, d, or g. And if you want to try it out, you can feel when you say the p sound, the mouth, the lips touch each other and block the air, so you're about to say p, like that. That's me creating a stop sound by blocking the air and then releasing it. When you block the air, when you stop the air, it creates pressure in the mouth, and then when you release this pressure, it creates that sound. So you get p, or d, or g, and we can try it together. Let's try it. Let's do the b sound, okay? So we're gonna put our lips together and say b. You can feel it build up. You can feel the pressure build up, and then release it, b. And that's a b sound. That's a stop consonant because you stop the air and then you release it. Now, a fricative consonant is a consonant where the sound has a lot of friction-filled air. And it continues. It's not stopping the air. So you get, for example, s, or f, or v, and you can feel it. Let's try it together, okay? When we say s, hear that hiss? That is friction, and that makes it a fricative. There's turbulence in the air when it comes out. It's not blocking the air, not like a stop consonant. It's a fricative. So that is a stop and then a fricative. And when you put them together, you get an affricate. Affricates are just a stop consonant followed by a fricative consonant. So for example, in English and a lot of languages, you get ch or j. There's other ones that happen as well, but they're not as common, I suppose. I can't think of many languages that have them, such as k. That's also an affricate because you got the k stop and you get the fricative. But the most common ones are ch and j. Now let's try saying the affricate. You probably don't have much difficulty, but although there are some languages where they find it difficult to say this because they don't have this sound, the ch sound, but it's just a t and then a sh sound. You start with a t, and then you say sh, t, sh, and then you make it faster, tsh, and then you make it almost instant, ch. So I know a lot of people think of this as one unit, and it often functions as one unit as well, ch. And there are languages where you can contrast the ch affricate with a actual stop and a fricative together, tsh, like in Polish, where you get chista and tshista, and those are different words because one starts with ch and the other starts with tsh. But in English, it's just ch. It's just the instantaneous one, although technically, physically, it's actually just a stop and a sh right afterwards, almost instantaneously, but in sequence still. So that's what an affricate is. So now we know how to pronounce it, let's talk about where it happens. This is actually pretty simple. In English nowadays, almost whenever you see a word spelled with T and R or D and R, just affricate it, and you'll get the sound more native sounding. The affrication of TR and DR sounds is pretty widespread in today's English, although older English speakers, maybe 60 plus years old, might not do it. I actually talked about this with Dr. Jeff Lindsay in the video interview he had with me, and Dr. Jeff, who is older than me, says he doesn't affricate it, but he does agree that teaching accent training clients to say it with affrication helps them sound better, because otherwise, instead of saying trip and drip, they'll say trip and drip, and it just sounds non-native because most English speakers nowadays do affricate and say trip and drip. So to repeat, if you see T and R in sequence, it's just trip, or D and R, it's just drip. So trip and drip. Let's try it with a few words, okay? Tree. Now a bit faster. Tree. Normal speed. Tree. Try. 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 True. 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 And then some more difficult words. Attract. Just one time now. Betray. Contract. Petrify. Atrophy. Retribution. Can you think of any other words? Comment them down below. And if you come this far, why not subscribe? Now, there's an exception, sort of. If you have an S sound before an T and R, it's optional. You can say street, you can say street without the affrication. You can even do what's a bit more regional, I think mostly in the Northeast, where instead of saying street, you'll say street. And so that's why you hear people saying things like, oh yeah, he's very strong, strong. Or like I was walking down the street with a street sound instead of street. And that's fine too. You will sound more native if you do that, although it's more regional. I do recommend, and I do teach my students to do street or just street without the affrication for the S, but it might be easier just to do affrication of TR and DR wherever you see it, and then just ignore the S thing, like don't make it a sh sound like street and just say street. That may be easier to remember. But if you do want to sound more Northeastern, you can say street and strong and stray like that. I do like learning regional slang and vocab sometimes, because when you learn these things, it's like only native speakers say it, and so you will sound more native. I do it in languages I learn, even if it's not the typical standard type of language that people learn. I like it because it feels more authentic and will sound more native. But anyway, now that we know the basic idea, let's talk about the wider perspective of this affrication concept in English. This is not particular to TR and DR. In fact, it's happened over the course of history in many words, not just in English either. For example, historically, you get the words such as nature, gradual, soldier, education, graduation, situation. It's spelt with a T or a D. But because there was a y sound afterwards, and I know it's not an R sound here, but it's also what's called an approximant sound. R and y are both approximant sounds, and what's happening here is a type of affrication. So you might have thought in the past, why are these words spelled with T and D when you're not actually pronouncing the T or a D? Why is it nature? Why is it gradual? Well, the reason was it actually was T and D before. But at some point, it affricated, and now you get nature. And the reason is that these things had a y sound, which kind of causes the tongue to go up a little bit, and then eventually it pushes towards the palate area or post-alveolar area, and it gets a bit messy, and it becomes like a ch sound. And that's why it probably evolved from nature to nature. And so I think in reenactments of Chaucer, perhaps, that Middle English pronunciation would probably have something like nature, although I need to check on that. Same thing with gradual and soldier. It probably used to be gradual or gradual. It probably was pronounced gradual and soldier, but now is gradual and soldier. Now, education, graduation, situation, these ones you can occasionally hear older, very old people with very conservative accents actually pronounce the D and the T. You might hear in those stereotypical like posh King's English, people might say, I don't think I'll attend his graduation. I don't think he has very good education. That sort of accent, and yeah, it's really rare nowadays to hear education and situation. That's really old-fashioned, although a lot of Russian speakers will actually say it that way, and I think some German speakers as well do say education and graduation situation, but don't do that. Almost nobody says that nowadays, so just say it with the affricated sound. Education. This affrication phenomenon also carries over to other English dialects. For example, in British, you might have things like, instead of Tuesday, you might get Tuesday and during and tune. And so there's that meme about British accents saying things like, it's Tuesday, innit? Right? So instead of it's Tuesday, it'll be like, it's Tuesday, innit? And so that's because Tuesday was, as I just said, with the y sound, Tuesday. That's more traditional accent, and a lot of people still say Tuesday in British English, although a lot say Tuesday as well. But in American English, it has dropped the y, which stopped it from becoming affricated. So it's not going to be Tuesday in American English, but in British English, often it can become Tuesday, or if it's more conservative, it will still be Tuesday. Right? There's actually one word where I say it, and I say during a lot, and I can't seem to get rid of it, although I don't really care that much because I kind of like the sound of it, so I say during instead of during. But yeah, that's just me. This has also historically happened in various other languages as well, so affrication is a very common type of historical sound change. So you also get this in Japanese, Polish, Brazilian Portuguese, and it also happens with T and D or T and D sounds, and it functions the same way as it affected the English words as well, because as I said, it's a typical sound change influenced by the physical anatomy we have in the mouth and the process of moving your tongue and other articulators of your mouth from one sound to another. Sometimes, if it's not done super carefully, it may shift. Your tongue will start to take shortcuts, and over time, that's just how the whole population pronounces it, and it just becomes messier, or like it just shifts to another sound. And that's why we now say nature and not nature. Yeah, it's just a very common process that happens in a lot of languages. So for example, in Japanese, you can see that they usually have very typical syllable sets like ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, ma, mi, mu, me, mo. But then when you get to the ta series, it's not ta, ti, tu, te, to, it's ta, chi, tsu, te, to. And then you also get it for the D series. So you get da, ji, zi, de, do, and not da, di, di, de, do. And that's because this, the E sound causes the D to become affricated and becomes G, or the T becomes affricated and becomes chi. This also happens in Brazilian Portuguese as well, so, but not European Portuguese. And so that's why for the word nationality, which in European Portuguese is something like nacionalidade, you get in Brazilian Portuguese, nacionalidade. Not nacionalidade, but nacionalidade. Although there are some dialects of Brazilian Portuguese where they say nacionalidade, I think, in the very south, but that's not the typical pronunciation. And so this is a big problem actually for Brazilians learning English or improving their English pronunciation and accent, because it can be really a big hindrance to understanding. I remember I've had trouble understanding Brazilian Portuguese speakers speaking English a bunch of times with the T and D sounds in certain words. So for example, one time a Brazilian was talking about their chin, and I was like, what's a chin? And she's like, no, like my chin, my business chin, my group, my chin. So she actually meant team, but she was saying chin. And so it became a completely different phoneme because ch is a completely different phoneme, and it can really hinder the understanding of listeners. So that made me really confused when I was listening to that speaker because it sounded like a completely different word. Finally, this also happened in Polish historically, which is why Polish often seems to be the most phonetically unique among the Slavic languages. All the historical T and T and D and D sequences have been affricated in Polish. So whereas in most Slavic languages the word for children is something like dzieci, in Polish it becomes dzieci. And even the word for Latin seems to be completely undecipherable, changing from the more common pronunciation of something like Latinska in other Slavic languages to the Polish łacińska. While TR and DR has been around, I estimate maybe probably 30, 40, maybe even 50 years based on how only old people don't affricate these sound sequences, recently, while watching YouTube, I've been starting to notice that at least some native English speakers, native English-speaking YouTubers, are affricating the TW sequences. So they would not say 12, 20, and between, but rather 12, 20, and between. I thought it was really interesting sounding, but it's not too far a deviation. It's not too different from affricating tr and dr, because it's also another approximate sound, a w sound after the T, which, you know, it would fit the pattern of approximate sounds like R or Y affricating the sound before it, like T and D. So yeah, 12, 20, and between. I don't recommend incorporating this into your accent though, because I think it's still a very small minority of native speakers. Stick to the TR and DR affrication and you'll be good. So that's today's show on TR and DR affrication. Hopefully this has helped. Thanks for tuning in so far, and if you've enjoyed it, if you found it helpful, I would love it if you could subscribe to the show, leave a comment or a review wherever you consume the show. And if you want to learn more about accent training and maybe even work with me, you can get some free materials and get started free when you sign up for my newsletter at accentamazing.com/start. So thanks so much today, and until next time, let's make your accent amazing.